Welcome to One on One. I'm James Brown. Hope, fear, in the first of 2 episodes on modern capitalism, when our show continues. I like to start all of these the same way. What's your full name at birth and what do you do?
My full name at birth, Jonathan Michael Corsini Greenbaum, born in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn. And what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So for a living, I am a community organizer. I believe, like my card says, coordinator, Neighbors Rock program. But yeah, I'm somebody who works with residents who are either looking to form a neighborhood group or already in one.
How do you get from Brooklyn to Rochester?
Oh yeah. My folks were born in Brooklyn and in the 30s, and Brooklyn didn't seem so cool in the early 60s, you know. So for them, the dream was going out to Long Island. So that's where I was raised, and I got into college, went up to southern tier of New York, beautiful valley in Binghamton's, SUNY Binghamton, and never went back to Long Island. It's not as fun as Upstate. Upstate is much better than Long Island.
What's the best part of? Well, better question. Comparing Long Island versus Upstate.
Yeah.
Why is it better?
Why is Upstate better? Well, Upstate still has. Like Rochester still has parts of it that have not, like you have the Strip in Henrietta and in Greece, right? And so it's corporate chain Miracle Mile. Long Island is, you know, it's just house, corporate chain Miracle Mile, house. And there's no, you know, there's no locally anything. You know, there's no farms. Yeah, so
I'm just wondering.
Scenes are not. I don't remember there being like local scenes, and I could be wrong, and this could all be mythology that's just, you know, in my head. It's someone from Long Island is going, "What are you, crazy? There's all this cool stuff going on down there." But that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I'm just wondering when did you start to notice that was Long Island that way your entire life? Was there a moment of change or a moment of realization where you realized that Long Island was that way?
You know, I didn't have a car when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. Some of my friends did, so I didn't really have a broad overview of the area, and I just lived in that, you know, one little suburban town in Nassau County. I had lived out in Suffolk, but while I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, Long Island went from a place where there were plenty of potato farms and other farms to a place where pretty much it's all been turned into housing development as far as, you know, I understand right now. It was a shock to come to Rochester. Binghamton is a little more like downstate than Rochester is. Rochester... And I had been in Albany for a while, and people still have New York accents in Albany. You know, people order coffee in Albany. It's still there, and there's a bustle there. But when I came to Rochester, it took me a while to figure out that, like, you know, you don't always have to say everything that comes to your mind. In Rochester, people have a filter, and they're polite. And in Brooklyn, Long Island people just come, you know, you got a booger on your nose, you know, it's everything, just there's no filter. One thing I do miss about Long Island is there's no bad pizza, and like the New York pizza line is Syracuse as far as I can tell, or maybe Utica. I think people would put the pizza line in different places. I'm going to say between Utica and Syracuse is where you go, where pizza turns from downstate, you know, thin crust pizza into, people are confused and they think pizza is Chicago pizza, right? And as it gets the thicker crust, so like Salvatore's is Rochester pizza. But, you know, those of us who have figured it out now go to Pizza Stop on State Street.
That's a great place. Pizza Stop.
Oh, my God. It's from Massapequa.
Is
from
he?
Long Island, yeah.
I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Jerry Seinfeld's town.
So as you moved to Binghamton and then Albany.
Yeah.
Tell me about the transition to Rochester.
Yeah, we went to Massachusetts too. Came here. Yeah, came here for work. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. You know, I could back up. I didn't know.
We can back up if you like.
That's an interesting thing. The fact that I wanted to be a teacher. I remember being a young man and not understanding how to come into the world. Like how to come into being, how do I take my place in America, and I just couldn't figure it out. And you know, it must have been something about the way me and my brother were raised, because he never did. Like he lives off the grid. Like, you know, he went from his house to CBGB's, you know, the house where we grew up, to CBGB's, to a Grateful Dead bus, to living in Seattle, you know, eating out of dumpsters and growing his own food. So he's kind of off the grid. And I was like, how do you know, the world is upside down. I can't get my bearings in it. And I read Summerhill and I thought, oh, I could be a teacher in a Summerhill type school. So, cause that was not Babylon, you know, it wasn't Babylon. It was like a different way of thinking about how humans should interact, and schools would prepare people for honest interaction. I thought I could do that. I'm not going to compel anybody to learn anything, you know. So it's pretty radically libertarian. And I thought I could do that. Come to find out, I'm not such a good teacher. You know, and there I had a room full of 6 and 7-year-olds, and there were some things we had fun doing, and I could figure some stuff out. But ultimately, you need a certain level of charisma and human presence to get a bunch of 6-year-olds on task, you know, thinking about, you know, and not like falling on the floor and tussling with each other, or, you know, playing Barbies under the table. So, time to move on. Yeah. So that's why we came to Rochester. I got a job at the Cobblestone School, which was, at that time, looked like a really neat alternative school. They were doing some really cool stuff, and I believe they still are.
I want to step back for a moment.
Okay.
You mentioned you need a human presence to keep people on task, or, you know, little people in this case.
Yeah. Like a magnetism.
Yet as a community organizer, aren't you doing essentially the same with adults?
Well, you know, that's so interesting, because I never thought about it. I just made the connection now that, yes, it's like I'm doing what I originally set out to do, which is as an organizer, I don't impose anything on anybody. So like Cobblestone would be like, okay, there's a certain amount. It wasn't libertarian at Cobblestone. There's a certain amount, and we need to take these kids through this curriculum, or we're going to have them do this exercise or this kind of thing. As an organizer, I come in, I go, what do you want to work on? You know, you don't want to work? Fine, I'll go to the next street. You know, I get called in by someone who wants, you know, this is happening, or, you know, we need to be more together. And, you know, frequently you're called in because someone got broken into, or there's an open air drug market, or there's been a shooting. And that's why you're called in, and people, you know, want to do something. So they're motivated to act. So you're just like, fine, how can I help? So you're not directing people or trying to move them towards anything that they're not ready to do. I think of myself as a midwife. My job is to say, you know, breathe, push, and you know, try sitting up this way, or lie down or something, squat. That's my job as an organizer. Whereas teachers, you know, so it depends what kind of, you know, but American schools, you know, it's like you've got to learn this stuff, you know. Have the baby now. I don't want to have a baby.
I'm wondering, how long did you spend in education?
So it was like 3 years and then another 5 years.
So 8 total?
Yeah.
How'd you get out?
The woman who was doing uh, language classes, she was teaching the kids sign language, was also cleaning houses. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I have a kid on the way, and I got a 3-year-old at home. And how do I provide for my family? And she's like, clean houses. So I went from, at a cocktail party being able to say, yes, I'm a teacher, to I'm cleaning houses, I'm delivering pizzas. My third job, though, was taking part in a labor think tank. So that was probably, I had some sense of I was unique in that way. Yeah, but so interesting class, it was like a compression. I lost all my trappings of any aspirations to middle classness. And that was, I went through some mental gymnastics at that point in my life, and it was good. I think I think class failure is probably good for everybody in America. Should have the rug pulled out from under them in order to better understand who they are as people and understand their place in society. Because I don't know that I could understand what's going on as well if I had just kind of been allowed to continue in my bubble.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
It makes me want to move on, jump a couple questions, but
jump ahead.
Why not? We'll jump ahead. I know when I messaged you, and I asked you to be on the show, you mentioned it's good to be alive at the end stages of capitalism.
That was kind of like dark humor, I guess. I don't know if I really feel that way. I'm not sure if these are the end stages of capitalism. We have entered some sort of turbocharged, exploitative version of capitalism. It's pretty incredible, and I see that and so I try to read my landscape that I'm working in terms of those kind of huge macroeconomic forces in the daily lives of people on a street, and try to understand the connections between Fed policy or trade agreements, or entitlement programs, employment policies, or fiscal stuff, austerity. All these things play out in a very specific way in neighborhoods, and I've just I have a very tangible sense of what that kind of capitalism looks like, that kind of predatory winner-take-all stuff looks like in people's lives, in their psyches, in their friendships, in their families, and on the streets of their community. It's it's almost like trying to keep some sort of spiritual level of awareness as I go through my day. Just I went off the deep end there, but so yeah, what's going on now is insane. I mean, up is down and down is up. We're talking about so in Albany and DC, we're talking about we need to cut the deficit. Forget about the fact that the deficit has been going down, and the debt to GDP ratio is back where it's been, and it's definitely time to really look at things that are important, like the fact that half of Americans are earning around 20 grand, less than 20 grand a year, or I just saw that today. It was like half of Americans are struggling, like they are really freaking struggling, and policies that are put in place are not creating more jobs. We don't have, the term stimulus became had negative connotations, and the Austerians seem to be carrying the day, and so what that means on a daily basis is that there's less community development block grant funding. There was $20 million a year that came in to Rochester in the 90s, and that meant housing, it meant programs, it meant people had assistance, and it's like less than half of that now. It might be a third of that number presently coming into the city. In the 70s, you had the state had programs to share state income with cities, small, so like Rochester, Syracuse, and Buffalo had these infusions of jobs. If you remember the CETA programs, and people could, first-time home buyers, and there were summer jobs programs. Adopt a block, you could get paid to clean your street, and there were, there were opportunities for people who needed a hand up, and then you had Reagan, and it's like nothing, and he set the framework, and here we are, and it's just incredible. We get calls all the time from people who, maybe they're on Social Security or on disability. They're earning like $15,000 a year, $20,000 a year, maybe. And they've got a house, it's paid for. Taxes are $2,000 a year on their house, maybe. And now they've got and that's really hard for them. You earn, $15,000, $2,000 is like a percentage of that. Yeah. I can't do math in public. And then and then the roof goes. How do you repair a roof? Used to be that there'd be, federal funds, HUD, Housing and Urban Development Funds, would be available for people, or community development block grants funds, and you could stay in your home. And now what you're seeing is there's so many people, senior citizens in Rochester, without who need their roofs repaired, and then the insurance comes in. We're looking at predatory insurance companies that come in and they cancel their mortgage insurance because their roofs aren't good. And we're not hearing about this in the suburbs. Maybe it's because people in the suburbs are, their roofs are fine, they can afford it. But we suspect that what's going on is that they're kind of like redlining, or they're looking specifically in the city, and they're just cutting people's mortgage insurance, which means that they then get thrown into other, more expensive pools. It's called forced placement. And so now you're in a situation where it's like the poverty tax. So, the milk is 3 times as expensive in the corner store. Your mortgage is now more expensive. Everything's more expensive if you're poor. And you want to cash a check. For some reason, people have been living on a cash economy. They don't go to the credit union. And now it takes in order to get your hands on your cash, it takes money to get your hands on cash. It's incredible. So that's, when I say what did I say? Last stages of capitalism, where this is some hyper stuff. Neighborhoods I'm working in, there's 50% unemployment. Average income, median family income is like $20,000 a year. And so what, people don't have a sense that I can shape my world. They don't have a sense that I can have an impact on the world. That's that hope thing, but it's also a sense of what we call agency, so this sense I can, I'm someone who is writing history. It's more like history's being done to me. And so that's a job of a community organizer. Go in there, walk the people. What do you want to change? Okay, figure out how to help them win, walk them through a few victories. They come out the other end of those experiences, and like a flip a switch is flipped in their consciousness, and they now have a sense of, oh, okay, I'm a player. So that's what makes it worth it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot in there to dissect here. I'm thinking you spoke about the sense of powerlessness, as I'd call it. Part of me feels it's intentional.
Right.
I think in terms of how capitalism works.
Well, it's certainly not in capitalism's interest. It's not in the interests of millionaires or people who own, the means of production. It's not in their interest to have low unemployment. It's much better for them when lots of people are unemployed and desperate for any kind of job. They'll take any kind of crappy job for any kind of low wage. And when they're working, they're less likely to split on you because there aren't a lot of jobs around. So high unemployment is really cool if you're someone who owns a factory or, a business.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, but it makes sense. Economic sense. I'm a millionaire and I want you to be desperate and choose to work in the cheapest possible conditions for the least amount of money, because the money I make is the difference between the productivity you create and what I pay you. I am getting rich off of your surplus value, right? So you make something that's worth, you create $100 of value in an hour, I'm going to give you $8 and I'm going to keep the 92 to myself. And that's what's changed. So the other thing about late stage capitalism is from the 40s to the late 70s, you had productivity increasing, and you also had wages increasing. So the graph of the graph of productivity rising, there was the line was mirrored by the line of wages, and so things, everybody got wealthy together, and that kind of fell apart in the 80s. And so what you have now is, we're still being more productive. You could say American workers are kicking ass. You could say the technology is enabling them to be more productive per hour they're working. And so they're creating even more value per hour that they're working. And yet the deal got broke in the 80s, and we've been flatlining in our wages, and we're not getting to participate in any of that extra surplus value we're creating. And that's why the 1% is just becoming phenomenally rich. I mean, they've just cut loose from our universe, and they're flying off into some other stratosphere.
Okay, so if you have this this chunk of society that has broken loose and is totally out there, can they be reeled back in? Is that possible? Do you have any idea what it would take for them to be reeled back in? Or is this a fatalistic situation where we're slowly sliding down to the end stages of capitalism?
Right.
The end of instead of end stages, the absolute end, I guess it would be.
Right. Well, I guess it would be oligarchy or some other archy. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't look good. So I can only analyze things as much as I can, but so you just kind of have to go against the things that don't look good and kind of, know you're going to die with your boots on and did the best you can and that take some solace from times in history when things have changed. So usually revolutionary moments come when the middle class gets pissed off. So there aren't a lot of times in history when revolutions happen because the peasants got screwed and they, oh, we're going to take over. Usually it's what happens is you have folks who had a little bit, a decent amount, and then that's taken away from them, and they're used to having their way or having some say of being at the table a little bit, or at least standing outside the door, and that pisses them off, and so any time that there's been any huge economic dislocations in terms of more equality, that's been the case, is my understanding. So, will the squeezed American middle class make a stink? At what point will the 20-somethings who owe $100,000 on their college debt, start to do the thing that changes the lever of power, whatever that is? And I don't know. I was an issues organizer, and was very humbled by the Occupy movement. We're out there trying to, like, you see, we're trying to frame things. If I knew the answer was camp out in the park and talk about the 1%, then I would have just done that 25 years ago. Who knew? But so you never know. But what Occupy did was succeeded in changing the frame. Certainly didn't create a lasting institution, but now people talk about the 1%. You can say the 1%. I couldn't talk about the 1% 5 years ago. I did. Nobody knew what I was talking about. Or you'd say, to the upper the upper quintile, the upper 1% of the, and people would know what you're talking about. Now people do. So at least we have a vocabulary.
Wow, a ton in there. So you have an experience as this issues organizer. You said 20 years ago, 25 years ago?
Oh, well, I was always getting involved. So that going back to being like my brother, I went to school and I was like, I don't think humans are capable of anything. I just want to transcend, and, enough with humanity. You guys are nuts. I'm out of here. And slowly, got pulled back to earth and started to get involved in, like, the anti-apartheid movement and, solidarity with people in Central America and nuclear arms race. That was the stuff going on. And then did some community organizing in Binghamton. Well, actually, I did a survey, which was a part of community organizing. And so I always did something, right? Because I come from a radical family. So grandfather was in the Communist Party. My dad helped form the union at his workplace. My mom was a shop steward. She was a, early feminist, second wave feminist. So, I never had a chance to, just put on a polo shirt and report to work and make my way. So always doing something, but, while I'm delivering pizzas and cleaning houses, I kind of backed my way into a $10 an hour job at Metro Justice for $20. So here's, who's stupid enough in this community to take $200 a week? So I raised my hand. Everybody else said no. So I wound up with the job. And so I spent 7 years, working with Metro Justice on a lot of progressive issues. And with hindsight, it's very interesting because, I remember being a little belligerent with a reporter once because they had characterized, is it fair to say you're a leftist organization? I was like, come to think of it, it's not leftist. Every position we've ever taken is a majoritarian. Everything that group did while I was there was the stance of a majority of people in Rochester or a majority of people in the United States or in New York. So it was, it's kind of like populist.
So do you believe that the majority of people in the United States lean left is not quite the right term, but in terms of social issues, they're closer to the left than they are the right, and I know it's a strange paradigm there, but
I don't know. Like the gay rights movement is just amazing. I mean, think about that. It's just in your lifetime, and it was actually your generation that did this. I remember going to the Metro Justice Board, it must have been like 5 or 6 years ago, and saying, I think there's a possibility that New York could pass an equal marriage law so that gay couples could get married in New York State. And I was like, wow, really? And we talked about it, and we took the right stand, but we also looked at the polling. And not that you should look at polling when you do something, but it was approaching 50%, but the trajectory was like insane. It was like this steep climb, like it was about to skyrocket. And now it's just a matter of there's small pockets of people who it's probably 60-40 right now, but I don't think if you're 30, I don't think it's like that for 20 and 30-year-olds. For 20 and 30-year-olds, it's probably like 80-20.
Definitely, from my perspective, I think just about anyone who frowns on gay marriage that's around my age, and I'm 29. You're looked at like you have three eyes, basically.
Right.
Like
right.
It's I don't even think it's 80-20. I think it's probably closer to 90-10. I mean,
how did that happen? That was just incredible. It was like
I mean, does that kind of thing give you hope? I mean,
yeah, that and recycling. I love the recycling example. When I was a kid, nobody recycled.
Okay.
There was no box. Everything went in the landfill, and somebody said, you know what? I'm going to change the habit of every household in the United States. I'm going to. I think we should have our waste stream get smaller. And it's easy. All you have to no, it's not easy. It's hard. Every day you have to separate what you throw out, and then you have to build these facilities. And people would look at these visionaries and say, "You are crazy. Nobody's going to do that." And here we are. Who complains about returning 5-cent bottles? Who complains about putting the newspaper in the blue box? Everybody does it. So change is possible.